Hey everybody, welcome to Jacobin YouTube. I'm Kilpatrick, your host, story editor at Jacobin, and with me today is Matt Christman of Chapo Trap House. So say hello, Matt. So before we kick off, I just want to say happy May Day to everybody. This is an important moment for socialists, important holiday. But before we get going, I want to introduce what Jacobin YouTube is. So basically, we're doing these Jacobin at home series every day, or most days, at 6 p.m. Eastern. And then on Saturdays at 1 p.m., we have weekends with Anna Kasparian and Michael Brooks. So check that out. It's really important that you tell people to like and subscribe to the channel to see what's next. We have lots of big plans in store for the new YouTube channel. So please tell your friends. And right now, all weekend long, in honor of May Day, we are having a May Day special sale for subscriptions. All subscriptions are $10. That's a year subscription to print. $1 digital subscriptions. Just follow the link in the description below. It's a great way to support Jacobin and to support our work and spread the word to other comrades. All right, so let's get on with the chat. So welcome, Matt Christman. I appreciate you doing this.
Happy to be here.
Great to have you on. I've done Chapo a couple times, so it's nice to have you on Jacobin Turf. Let's get right to it. Okay, so today we saw another instance of Joe Biden having a bit of a senior moment on question about the current Tara Reade thing. So I just wanted to ask you, is this going to sink Joe Biden? Oh, bless you.
Is it going to sink him?
Yeah, it's going to sink Joe Biden.
It will sink Joe Biden to the degree that the Democratic Party feels confident in their control over the process of maintaining the seat, as it were. If the DNC feels like they have the ability to switch candidates and maintain influence at the current rate, I could see them making a switch. I would say, though, that I doubt they feel confident enough to go for it. I feel like they have to go down. For now, I feel like they have to go down with the Biden ship. That might change if he gets substantially worse and they're not able to sort of starve this Tara Reade thing the way they've been trying to, then they might have to get serious about a Hail Mary. Right now, I think they're still operating on the assumption that they do not have sufficient control over a handoff process to risk one. So they're going to stick with Joe for now.
Right. Well, who would they even have to hand it off to? I mean, like Andrew Cuomo, Hillary.
Right. Well, I mean, the thing is that I do believe there's a good degree of manufacture of consent going on behind like the Cuomo stuff. But I think it's equal parts East Coast media bias, honestly,
Right.
because they're all in New York and DC and all they see is Cuomo. And also the fact that they did have a need for a backup, not necessarily because they were going to do a switcheroo, but
Right.
because something might literally happen to Joe Biden. There might be a physical intervention that makes them have to scramble, and they don't want to be in a situation where they have to go with the second place finisher for obvious reasons.
Right. I guess I want to ask a little bit about watching this current meltdown of the same people that have been telling us for years now, the kind of like Democratic Party liberal feminists that have been championing Me Too. They're basically like, they started this like liberal cultural revolution, and now they're basically saying like, let's end this. Let's lower this. So I want to ask you something about a friend of mine named Vincent Bevins said on Twitter. He's a reporter, and he made a really great point that he's saying that, here's the deal, saying that, look, our candidate is majorly flawed, but he's much better than the alternative. That's a coherent position. If your goal is to basically like improve material reality for the working people, or at least stop things from getting worse, as they likely would under a Republican. But the problem right now is the Democratic media is controlled by, as we like to call them, the PMC. And these are people whose material realities, if anything, improved during Trump. So their investment in the Democratic Party is like, we're the party of good people. We're the party of the good moral candidate. So right now you have these two parts of the base that seem to be scrambled. Do you think that's part of this kind of like weird schizophrenic, change up on like, we're taking it seriously, but we're not taking it seriously?
Well, I think the main thing is that they have a deep conflict of interest at the base for your media feminists who are identified in their minds with the Democratic Party sufficiently to care to drag Biden's corpse across the finish line, to be invested enough to do that. You both want that. Your interest there is to ignore this,
Right.
or claim that it's not real. But that desire is at cross purposes with the desire to maintain Me Too as a weapon.
Right.
To maintain Me Too as something they could use in the future in different political environments, so that they can defeat enemies to their left or right. They don't want to disarm themselves with Me Too as a potential tool.
Right.
So because if they could just say, yes, there's a moral calculation made here. I think I've described why it's wrong. But if you're thinking liberally and two-dimensionally, yes, there's a moral requirement that the Democrats win.
Right.
But that would require you to say either it's not that huge of a deal that he did this, in which case the moral necessity of Me Too gets undermined.
Right.
Or you say, yeah, but I don't believe her for X, Y, and Z reasons. But the problem there is that her case is just as strong as cases like Blasey Ford, where they invested full emotional energy.
Right. Actually, her case is stronger.
Exactly. That can't hold. So it cannot be fought on the basis of evidence.
Right.
Because either one makes you have to reveal that you don't actually believe this.
Right. And you're talking about it like it's a bioweapon.
This is not a real, what I'm saying is that Me Too is not a real principle to you. It is a tool to you.
Right.
The real principles are me having influence in the Democratic Party and the Democratic Party having influence over the country.
Okay. No, that makes perfect sense. So I guess I want to ask you, following up on that, like, is it just me? Is there just like this kind of like Warrenism dead ender phenomenon going on at the same time? And I want to ask you, is Warren, do you think that's just like the thwarted future of that this coalition desperately wanted? Like, why are we still entertaining this fantasy that Liz Warren could be the running mate, or that's going to push things to the left? So I want to ask you a little bit about this kind of Warren dead-enderism or whatever.
I think that Warren dead-enderism is a function of a larger dead-enderism,
right,
which is the dead-enderism of I don't want to trigger people, but broadly construed, people in the Democratic Party, both within it and people who voted for it and had a part of their identity, for a identity politics theory of political change. Because if you are a Warren stan, or you're in the K Hive, or you're somebody who is mad that like candidates of color didn't make it farther,
right,
and then you're left with Biden. So you have investment in the Democratic Party as a vehicle for your hopes and dreams. Your hopes and dreams defined because you're a liberal Democrat by advancement for me and people like me, i.e. women, i.e. African Americans, whatever. And that means, and if I think that the Democratic Party is the vessel for that aspiration, then it should end up with someone like me at the head of the ticket. It should not end up with someone who repudiates every principle I hold together that has got me here. The principles of don't grab the asses of your female staffers. The principles of don't hang out with segregationists. The principles of don't be in favor of segregation. Don't be in favor of the Iraq War. Don't be in favor of credit card companies. Don't be in favor of capital against workers and of men over women and whites over blacks. By every intersecting oppression, Joe Biden is on the wrong side.
Right.
He's in charge of the party that you've invested meaning in. How do you resolve that tension? You resolve it by getting mad at Bernie Bros. You have to put it off somewhere. Right. And you have to blame someone else. And it's Trump, and it's Russia, and it's Fox News, and it's Bernie Bros. All of those are expressions of your model of how to get what you want colliding with reality.
Right. See, this is something you brought up in a recent episode of Chapo Trap House. You were talking about how one of the great things about this primary was it was kind of like a mask off. It was like an experiment to show what happens when you run on, like, how worthwhile it is to run on these kind of identitarian concerns, how much they work, can you tell me a little bit about your theory of the Democratic primary 2020 as like a massive social experiment putting to the test all these things that the liberal left, said were priorities, or not priorities, said were important and that would work? Can you what do you think about that?
Well, all right. before Bernie Sanders showed up on the scene, Democratic presidential politics in the post-neoliberal era was defined by such narrow bounds of difference that small differences could be magnified and made bigger, which allowed more freedom of latitude for individual politicians trying to gain power.
Right.
Bernie, by creating contrasts, makes it harder to find that fake degree of agreement that's at an abstract enough level that it doesn't actually imply that you have to do anything on its behalf. That becomes harder. And so you have to define your issues more rigidly. And that means that things like identity politics have to become more salient because you have to find a new axis to disagree with or to agree with in opposition to Bernie, because it can't be on economic axis because you're supposed to agree with them on that.
Right.
And so that creates a situation where there's an ever-present pressure that only gets stronger as the contradictions increase to exacerbate and emphasize those unique elements. That's how ID Paul somehow, even though it starts with the idea of intersectionalism, on Twitter, it splinters into people having what they call, oppression Olympics or whatever. And really, that's just an argument about like whose interest should be first. But that's the inevitable byproduct of the liberal approach to power. And it stands in contrast to Bernie's dialectical approach to power.
Right. I want to ask you about that because we were talking the other day and I said, well, what do you want to talk about? And you said, well, I think I finally truly understand dialectics.
Yeah.
And so I want to ask you, for someone who I think I know what dialectics are. I've thought I've known about it, but it made me realize, maybe I don't. Can you tell me, Matt Christman, what are dialectics and why are you suddenly having this epiphany about them? Because it sounds like it's one of those things about Marxism that falling rate of profit or whatever that we can just like forget about.
It's true because people forget about it. The reason they forget about it is because they can't think about it long enough to make it make sense. They get bored or they hit like their ratiocination limit. And it's usually not one or the other. It's a combination of both. You hit your brain's natural ability to absorb the symbolic meaning, and you also lose your ability to withhold pleasure long enough to keep figuring it out, and then you give up. And that's what I did, and that's what most people do at some point at almost everything they believe. And what I realized is that the dialectic was one of those things, a dead concept that I understood some of the implications of and applied as needed, but that I did not understand the foundation of. I did not understand the whole contours of. And I feel like I have slipped into a process that has taken me my entire life, but also punctuated by specific, like Satori moments, that I now understand the dialect not as a dead concept, but as a tool of thought, which is the spiritual replica of the physical engine of matter, the thing that literally causes the Big Bang and causes all matter to fire off and obeys the laws of thermodynamics until all matter is extinguished. That same force that is within all matter is within our brains in the form of dialectical concepts being arrayed against each other until we arrive at a new combination of the forces that we brought together in conflict.
But let's apply this. So
basically what I'm saying is I understand dialectics to a degree of specificity of metaphor that I am fully convinced. I now, because of that, feel that I can explain it to other people at a much higher degree of confidence than I used to be able to, but not fully.
Right.
So
but one of the
on a scale, because all yes/no questions are both yes/no, but also on a scale of rightness at all times. I understand dialectics at a deeper level of symbolism than I did before. At least I feel that. And what that has gotten me is to the point where I understand that I cannot explain to you. I would be defeated by the task of trying to explain it to you as a concept, because that's my brain. It taxes my brain too much. What I can do is apply it to specific questions and then show you through example.
Okay, then let's go through example, because you were explaining to me that dialectics is the antithesis. A dialectical understanding of politics is the antithesis of the understanding of left politics that permeates in Twitter.
Yes.
Okay, explain what you mean by that.
Because they come from different They are motivated by different theories of the self. There is a liberal subject. Okay. Now
All
we
right.
are all liberal subjects to some extent. We are liberal subjects to the extent that we accept liberal principles. First liberal principle is there are other people around me. They're roughly equivalent to me in some way. Like we are categoried together, and everything else works from that. That's the initial liberal subject, the one that recognizes an other. That's step one of liberalism. We are all liberal subjects. There are non-liberal subjects in the world. The Sinhalese tribesmen that kill everybody who comes near them, I bet are not liberal subjects. Most of us in the world by now are to some degree or another liberal subjects with that as our baseline of understanding of ourselves and ourselves. We understand ourselves in relationship to someone else that we recognize as similar but different. You know what I mean?
Right.
Okay.
Saying,
but wait a minute.
Okay.
Oh, continue.
I was going to say, so even under you're basically saying in America, even Trump is fundamentally
everyone is. Everyone
yes,
is.
We all
Karl Marx is. Karl Marx is, because he was
Right.
born after the liberal subject became hegemonic in Europe. He was a liberal subject to that extent. Okay. Now take a guy like Chomsky. He is admitted that he is in the liberal tradition and that anarchism is in the liberal tradition. It is. He believes in the liberal subject, which is a subject that is a non-moved upon mover, that is a identity that is independent of outside influence to some extent and can operate independently by itself. That's the liberal subject. And having that fully formed liberal subject making decisions, they're going to make certain category errors. That is why Chomsky erroneously tells people it's a moral duty to vote Democrat every election, because he's only looking at it through that axis. Now, Marx was a liberal subject to the extent that he recognized himself as in opposition to other people. But because he was smart enough, his brains worked the right way, and he found himself in the time and place to observe both up close and in patterns, industrial capitalism being born, he could come at it from outside of it. And that means that he could press this new reality of industrial capitalism against his pre-existing liberal self through actions and thoughts coming from actions, and then arrive at a new understanding. That says that there is no unmoved self. The dialectical self is just a process. The dialectical spirit, the brain, everything we think of as a soul is not a thing in itself. It is a process that produces something.
Then let's take that.
Creates a different anchoring for your next level of decision-making trees.
So let's get dialectical on what happened in the past few months and what's about to happen. What can we what is it that we're failing to understand because our brains are this mush in this social media generated like political, understanding of what's going on? How can being more dialectical, which I honestly just saying that I can't believe I'm saying it. Like, what can we learn that we're not learning now about apply to the specific things? Like we were talking about how Twitter is all about like, oh my God, this guy said this bad thing. Everything he says is garbage.
Dialectical, it's about reifying distinctions rather than bringing them together.
Right. And he's refusing to accept that someone who might repulse you might have a point. Because
the thing is, they are not, here's the thing, everyone is right and wrong simultaneously in equal measure. Right. I am right. Everything I've been right about, I've been wrong about at an equal time because at a different place in time, what I thought and what activated my actions and what helped me make the world isn't true anymore. Right. So you have to start from the idea that everyone is wrong, including you, about everything. And first, that makes it easier to argue because you don't get mad. You literally, like everyone on Twitter, the whole thing is getting someone else mad because you're literally trying to get somebody to the point where they stop trying to reason with why they think what they think and respond with hostility because they have been made to feel an emotion, because they've got pent up frustration because they have not worked through the problem. And you're helping them. I'm not mad.
This is funny to me.
And so the madder you are, basically, if you're madder, it means objectively you understand your position less, meaning you're wronger. And it's like, yeah, that's true. But if you don't care if you're wrong, if you embrace that you're wrong about everything, then that shit flows through you and you do not respond angrily, which means you don't get distracted and you work the question out to the root, or closer to the root than anyone you're talking to.
Okay, then that gives me to my next question, which is, let's do a little self-criticism. What were we wrong about in the past, let's say 2-3 years? Since what did we get wrong? And I mean you and me, or either one. I mean,
if I want to go, here's the thing though, you have to contextualize them in space and time. So you can't just say this when, you have to say this then. Like I would say and this is why it's so hard to talk about history and ascribe morality to history, because you want to be, you don't want to be presentist, but you want to give moral suasion. And the way you do that is you accept at some level of intuition that all actions in life are fully determined by physical circumstance like billiard balls, but also that every person has absolute freedom to choose in the moment that they choose. Those are both true at the same time. So that means like the me who chooses to start Chapo, he cannot make a different choice anymore. His choice has remade reality. Like I'm here instead of there. I have items here. I have created things. Things exist because of that decision and those things he made. Those can't be undone. So I cannot look back and say he did the wrong thing, because I wouldn't be here if he hadn't done it. I can say he chose wrong at the time, which is a different question.
Then let's say that. Let's just say that what did we get right and were we blind? I won't say wrong. What were we blind to?
I will say what at the most, like trying to be helpful with these concepts, the most purely, because like the dialectic is more, the deeper you get, the easier it is to handle, because the symbols mean more, because you're at a higher deep level of like understanding between the people talking. And then it gets less complicated as you go up. And so you have to talk about it more. Anyway, what was it? I've already lost my track. What was I saying?
Okay. Let me just, I'm going to make it like, I'll be really specific here.
Oh, not the things we made, the mistakes we made. Okay.
Yeah. What mistakes, what did we get right and what did we miss? Because I talked to you about this before.
At the macro, I'm sorry, I just got to.
Go ahead. No,
I don't actually. I don't have to get it out. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, I was going to say like, in some ways, I think we talked about this right after Super Tuesday. We never liked Warren. We always thought it was bad that she was running, but in a weird way, it was actually so much worse than any of us thought at the time. And what did we miss about this kind of force of the like affluent progressive PMC? Did we underrate their influence? Or, I mean, she didn't win. She didn't win a single state, but she did enough damage.
We failed to evaluate a few things correctly. I think the one thing that we honestly, those of us who, I guess there's two things you could have overestimated, I think, given what actually ended up happening. You could overestimate her importance to the process, which I think a lot of people did at all times, and that warped their relationship to her one way or the other, because she was never as influential or as threatening as she appeared. She was always a character who was going to float between two poles and just go and not ever, and basically be dissolved between them and never like overcome the other ones, because she just started from a smaller base. She just started from a smaller base, and over time it just ground down. It didn't expand. So we didn't get that would happen. We didn't get the softness of the support, I guess, the softness of the stone of the Warren support. So that was one way to mistake it, the material way. The other way to mistake them, which a lot of us did, I think I did to some extent, was the degree to which they were gettable, the degree to which they were on the right side because of their accepting of progressive points of view. I personally never really bought very hard that these people, when push came to shove, would embrace socialism over Democratic Party discipline. But I thought there was a chance. I think a lot of people thought there was more of a chance than I did. And it turns out that we were all overestimating the chance there was. And the thing is that the reason that I think I more correctly than some rated her degree of, or her degree of earnestness and her supporters agree. I was like, I don't really buy that these people are all just socialists who have gone astray. I think most of them are not good. But there are a few, but the thing is, there were a few who you could tell are just going along because they didn't want to get yelled at, or they thought they were solving some problem. They were triangulating off the bros. But at the end of the day, if you got rid of her, they would go for Bernie. Well, all that energy spent on her was wasted because I fundamentally misapprehended her actual importance to the process. She ended up being a sort of the last gasp of a dying segment of the electorate that is losing influence.
You think it's losing influence?
Oh yeah.
Because here's the thing, like that guy, what's his name, Sean McElwee, whatever. You know, he's going out right now saying, hilariously enough, you Bernie bros, you don't get it. The future is social democracy from affluent suburbs, a la Warren. But Warren didn't win a single state. She got 9% of the total vote. But at the same time, they can make a case that they can put together in a very limited way this kind of like 2018 coalition of affluent, liberal-minded progressives. They can just get enough over to slightly win, but it's not enough to like change any reality in America. What you and I are proposing to do is really hard, you know, and we just saw that Bernie was unable to make that a reality, which is winning like the working class, winning like workers in overwhelming numbers. What ended up happening, I want to ask you about this, is that we saw Bernie win enormously with everyone not under 30, not under 35, but everyone under 45 and Latinos, and he basically lost everyone else. Why do you think this is happening? Because we're, as good Marxists, we reject generational politics, but at the same time, I'm looking at these returns and it's become impossible for me to deny what's happening. I've looked at the previous Democratic primaries and general elections. There's never been this like enormous age split in preferences, even in the like, you know, Nixon, McGovern days. Like, what's behind this?
I think you start, you apply the reason at the base, which is the material conditions. And so you ask, what is the material difference between those two cohorts? And the answer is capital. Over 40 people were the last before the last out of the cave before the fucking a mine caved in.
Right.
They were the last ones to hoard the filthy lucre, and because the engine that created that prosperity broke, and now they're just hoarding it, and it's not reproducing itself the way it's supposed to in a functioning economic system. They have a vested material interest in not seeing the wealth redistributed, because it would be directly from them to younger people, most of whom aren't related to them. And the ones who are related to them, they either have some sort of suppressed resentment of, or figure that they'll take care of with their inheritance.
Right.
So everything else gets built on top of that. Like the fact that they believed MSNBC that Bernie couldn't win. That's not the direction that went. MSNBC's viewers told MSNBC what to say about Bernie, the same way that Fox News's viewers tell Fox News what to say about Trump.
Right. No, that's a great point. I guess I'm just asking you, point blank, is there truth in generational politics in the sense of like when we just are winning 45 and under, and we say, oh, well, we didn't win older workers. I don't know. Like, do we disregard that victory?
No, it's true. It's true to the extent that there's a material distinction between older and younger people, and there is. And therefore, to the degree there is one, there will be a generational divide. Now, if that changed in some way, now, if say we get a magic, maybe we do one of these technological jumps. Hey, the magic money tree works again. We fixed everything. And if we distributed resources from a functioning economy, however that would be, it would distribute things more evenly. Now, that means that the politics would come back together around less radical aims, because the young people would be getting some, right, generally, and they'd be less in feeling like they need to act on their beliefs of injustice because they're more personally comfortable. Now, the other thing that could happen is the material conditions of the older workers deteriorate. Now, a lot of them are ideologically captured by concepts that make them basically unreachable. Fox News zombies, for example, and frankly, a lot of MSNBC.
Yeah, MSNBC, not zombies.
But they are not a majority.
Right.
And the thing is that as long as those generations only exist in the reduced shadow demiurgical form of the ones of them who vote, then that's going to persist. Now, if politics takes on another character in a crisis, and a lot of those older voters and older people see their material conditions decline, the ideological position of the younger people who have been radicalized by their privation could then be transmitted to the older people, but they would need their material conditions to decline first.
Right. No, I'm wondering if this is even possible now.
That's the thing. It's possible if the material conditions create it. This is why the way we think about like predicting politics, like our jobs, the pundit job is to predict what's going to happen. And that entire model is flawed because you are not going to be in that time with the information when those decisions get made. Those decisions are going to get made in the future. And when they're being made, they're going to be made with a different material reality undergirding them. It could be tiny, it could be huge, but it will change in some minuscule or large way the causality in a way that you can't predict. That's chaos theory. So that's why that's why you can predict things, but they have to be small, and you have to be able to reason your way all to the way to the end of the prediction. Then you can act on it. That's the dialect. Because if you've reasoned yourself to the end of an action, it's like, there is no way I am wrong. I should do this. Then you will just do it. You don't need to be reminded to. You don't need to write a post-it note on your bed. You don't have to fight with your urge to jack off instead, or go on the internet, or anything, or game. You'll do it because you have reached a point of total agreement with the world and yourself. But if you go beyond that, you're in a space-time that is not the same as the one you occupy, and you can't. And your predictions, they might be okay, they might be correct, but they will be accidentally correct because they will be on not a stable enough premise. They don't extend all the way to the question in space-time.
If you're just tuning in, you're watching Jacobin YouTube. My guest is Chapo Trap House's Matt Christman. Tune in, and click like, click fave, or whatever it is on YouTube. We have a reminder, we have all weekend, we have a May Day sale. Jacobin subscriptions are $10 for the year, $1 for a digital only subscription. So please subscribe. It's the best way to support Jacobin and our work. So I want to ask about going forward. Bernie is almost 80. This feels kind of like, as much as we saw the experiment play out to see that we really did have a base out there, I have no idea how we could ever find another Bernie Sanders-esque figure to run for president. I feel like that's over.
People should stop. I mean, it's like, everything is a wheel. Life is a wheel, car is a wheel. I found myself so pissed during the time when Bernie was looking like he was on a path to victory, when we were all working hard.
Oh yeah.
Anybody saying, I'm actually skeptical of electoralism, because I knew what they were doing. What they were doing is they were showing themselves separate from the movement, because there is an incentive in a movement that has the social media aspect, where you have a mercenary interest, short-term interest in your own aggrandizement. You need to stand out from the herd. That's why there's all that insecure need to point out what you don't agree with Bernie about. It's all ego. And I knew that, so I'm like, shut up. But the thing is that there was a kernel of truth to that, and it's good people, even if that was out of the wrong reasons, out of the wrong motivation, keep bringing that up, because elections should only be pursued to the degree they're useful. And elections are still useful, but right now, presidential politics, I don't think, is a useful terrain. But there's all of this excess energy people were directing that they don't know what to do with. And so that's why I say you have to cut off the head. Just assume there's don't look for a presidential replacement. It doesn't exist. Cut the head off of the snake, let the head die, and then let the new head come up, and find a new base. If you really think elections, if you find yourself thriving in an electoral context, knocking on doors, having issues, if you feel that gets you to action better than theorizing some other way, then pick an election and go for it.
What I'm hearing is Jesse Ventura 2020.
All right, that is only for the advanced adept who has enough excess orgone energy to give a little bit for jokes to presidential politics. But I gotta say, somebody did suggest to me Bernie as the VP to a Ventura ticket, and that actually gave me pause and made me think that not only could like be a John C. Fremont in 1856 destruction of like the status quo, or could win, honestly.
The Pathfinder, baby. In fact, that brings me to our next topic. You and I are both Civil War nerds. We watched Glory together in 4K a few weeks ago before everything went. Yeah, it looked beautiful. And so I saw that you recently said, it either was on Twitter or was in a podcast.
You said
it was Twitter. Okay, because we have a question. I already have a question. And it was, you said Biden is James Buchanan.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
I think once again, you have to do all a billion caveats about these are all just category overlapping. They don't have, there's a bunch of things different because we're in different space-time. It's all, you have to do the throat clearing. And really what the throat clearing boils down to is your faith in me as this person who is going to give you my best effort to explain it. So if you believe that, we can assume that there's some reason to compare these two. That being said, if you view the crisis of capitalism, the crisis of the political economy we are in, and have been since the 70s, in terms of its pressure on brittle democratic institutions, it is a similar degree of pressure that slavery still existing within the industrial capitalist system of the United States also placed on the brittle machinery of American democracy. And that in that situation, you have a pre-crisis era when the crisis could still be realistically ignored, when it was overseen by caretakers, notably caretakers of the sectional dispute that was where anti-slavery sentiment resided. The base didn't want slavery. Even the Democratic Party's base didn't want slavery extended, didn't want slavery to be the signal, the morning star of American politics and economy the way it was. But their party leaders embodied collaborating with it to the extent that it kept things safe until those pressures couldn't exist. So if you see the dough faces before Lincoln, like Pierce and Buchanan, as like the dough-faced Democrats, dough-faced vis-a-vis capitalist, you have a base of Democrats who wants to challenge capital and reduce its power over their lives, the same way you had a base of Democrats and future Republicans, Whigs, wide awakes, whatever, in the North, who wanted to see slavery curtailed. But you have a leadership that's fundamental interests don't align with their bases. They are there to serve a continuing institution that has as its central feature finance capitalism now, chattel slavery then. And the crisis comes either it's a combination of a political and economic crisis. Right now, the political is pretty much in abeyance, and the economic is going to be the big plane. But either way, a crisis hits, and the brittleness of the coalitions that brought about these presidents, who are fundamentally powerless because they do not have the power to do what they can to accommodate what their voters want, because the structures of government created by the dumbass slave-owning aristocrats of the founding generation cannot be defeated, cannot be resolved without conflict that turns violent, because it cannot be abstracted beyond the level of violence, because there's no collective buy-in. We have no good faith in each other. Like, we couldn't have a constitutional convention tomorrow to make it possible to address coronavirus and the Second Great Depression. It would be fucking it would be like the gathering of the Juggalos meets it would be a nightmare, because there's no good faith among the participants.
And it makes sense. I mean,
only be able to resolve it through violence. And that is the inevitable outcome of a political and economic crisis that cannot be resolved by extraction being reduced and surplus being redistributed, and power being redistributed with surplus.
I want to push back on this just a little bit, because if your analogy is correct, then that would point to this slow formation of a new party that was happening before us, which I don't think is at all happening. Like, I mean, in 1855, is when you start seeing Whigs and some Democrats start forming into the Republican Party. It seems like we're quite a ways away from anything like that. Bernie in some ways is closer to our like John P. Hale or something like that. Like,
right. But the thing is that the point of crisis is not made by just political trajectory or material conditions. It's made by a combination of them at a specific time. The Civil War crisis was a political crisis first and foremost. There was no undergirding economic crisis at that time, correct? The American economy was basically functional. It was on the upswing. I mean, I believe there was an incipient panic, and it might have like exacerbated things, but there was a foundational functionality to the American economy. It was a political crisis first, fed by economic realities. What we're facing now, in an era where technology has replaced human participation in the economy. I'm sorry, the degree to which technology has replaced human inputs in the economy is the exact same degree to which technology has replaced human participation in politics. So there is no mass politics. Of course there's no wide awakes. Of course there's no fascists in the streets, because that space has been now filled by technology where we simulate politics. So instead of wide awakes in the streets, it's people online. And because those are online beliefs, they're not held as strongly, which means people aren't going to die for them. That means there's not going to be a civil war. That means we're never going to fight to keep our guns. We're never going to do anything, because our material comfort, the people who are in those positions, is too high to overcome their actual beliefs in abstract principles that at the end of the day don't involve their direct sustenance of themselves, because they gain so much identity and pleasure from distracting physical indulgences and technology.
Let's take a minute here. Well, first, let me plug one more time that you're watching Jacobin YouTube. Our guest is Matt Christman, Chapo Trap House. I also want to plug that we have the new Jacobin issue, should be shipping out soon. It is on coronavirus, and it is fantastic. Please subscribe, and you can get a hold of that. I wrote actually my favorite thing I've ever written for Jacobin is in it, which is my quarantine movie list. So,
oh hell yeah! What do you got?
Yeah, no, it was really like I kind of agonized over it, because I didn't want to select masterpieces, but I didn't want to be too contrarian. I wanted to find like the happy medium. So I put the Netflix Pee Wee Herman like really high up, which I love that movie.
Just let me one final.
Go ahead.
Tap on that is that because there was so much biopower, there was so much human investment in politics in the 1850s and 60s. That meant that America's political institutions were legitimized mostly by human investment of energy, which meant they were willing to kill and die for those beliefs. That degree of legitimacy has been passed over to technology. We believe in the government because the lights run, because gas stove works, because electricity works, because the water runs. That's why we actually believe in government, not because of its ideological content. We believe in it because it provides us with these things. Back in the 1850s, due to less technology, the government couldn't provide you with much. So it had to provide you with ideal. It had to provide you with spiritual meaning. It had to provide you with sense of purpose. Now it doesn't have to do that. We are all being exploited and alienated every moment. We have to put it somewhere. Some of us put it on politics, but at a symbolic level, which means that we will never, unless our material conditions change, act on them violently. Now, That is why I'm saying, politically, we are not anywhere near the crisis point of 1860, but we are near a crisis point of a similar magnitude that is actually material and not political, as in Second Great Depression with no way out of, and falling rate of profits on top of it, at a point that aren't reboostable unless you want another World War II.
All right. and a completely ungovernable country. So right now it's 6:45. So let's start taking some questions. So if you have any questions for Matt or I guess myself, list them or type them out on the YouTube. Is that the right way to say it? I'm very
I don't
old.
have no idea.
I'm very old millennial. I
Oh,
don't
me
know
too.
these things.
Oregon Trail, baby.
Yeah, basically, I have to look up like references you guys make on Chapo and everything, and
Well, that's
really
because
just, like,
I kept my hand on the till. And by the way, if you want to answer a question you asked earlier, mistakes we made, I now don't think it's a mistake because I wouldn't be here if it hadn't happened. But I made the wrong moral choice to start putting my frustrated political opinions on the internet.
Wait, what are you saying that was the wrong choice? Chapo's
at the
great.
time. At the time.
Hold on, explain that. So you're saying you regret it?
If I had been where I am now in terms of my approach to questions of like action and morality, I would have said, no, if I believe this and I have this time, I should work materially for these purposes. And I would have done something on the ground instead of logged on. Now, after years of mistakenly staying online and continuing the cycle of seeking pleasure that is more and more and more elusive on the hedonic treadmill to nowhere, that is the inevitable byproduct of trying to find meaning through distraction in the material world, I found Chapo, and that gave me a greater degree of understanding and made my life more rich than it was, complicated in other ways, set me off in another perspective, and it got me here. And at every one of those points where you stop, I'm making a choice. They were bad, they're better now.
No, the choices were good.
But they now in retrospect they were necessary. See, that's what I say. You got to replace the word good when you're looking backward with an act with necessary. It was necessary. It was a necessary precondition for anything that came after it.
By the way, I want to stop right now and say that apparently there's a lot of people watching, but not enough people clicking like. So right now, click like. This
Turn
makes
your
a
beliefs
difference.
into action right now.
Right now.
Follow the beam. You can follow the beam right now. If it's like, I like this, demonstrate your like with action.
By the way, just a note on the backgrounds. I just realized I never even mentioned what they were. We were looking at some samples from Adam Friedland's beautiful paintings that he's been doing on Instagram.
And you've been okay with the fact that when you do that, you kind of like start turning into Max Headroom and like getting bulbous.
I love fractured.
It. You like?
You mean talking about my skull?
No, I just mean like you get. I guess they call.
Oh yeah, I can see that. Yeah, like when I pick up
a
glass, you can't even see it.
Yeah,
no, I love that. I like the artificiality of it.
You do. You look like you're from the forbidden zone.
That's what I love about it.
You're hacking in from another dimension.
See, this is why
Sims universe.
This is why. But no, it's that's a note on the background. Some of it was. I put Gremlins 2, one of our favorite movies. I thought
my favorite movies.
And you got to meet Joe Dante, right?
Oh God, that was a thrill of my lifetime. We screened that movie in LA with him in attendance, and then he interviewed afterwards. It was so great because it's my opinion, it's a genius film. Joe Dante, at his height, one of the greatest directors ever. That and The Burbs is one of the best like popular culture 1-2 punches ever put together by a filmmaker.
Oh, that was a 1-2 punch.
Oh yeah, back to back, 89, 90. Wow.
Yeah. And then he did Matinee pretty soon after that.
Yes, also very good. But those two are just they sing. And the fact that Gremlins 2 was kind of a flop and he kind of hated making it, because apparently he hated making Gremlins 1 because it was such a pain in the ass to work with the puppets. And that's why he turned down Gremlins 2 for years until they got enough technology so that he could work with the puppets without getting too annoyed. And they still like fucked with him and cut things and made his life hell. And to see it in a room with a whole crowd of people, a movie that bombed at the time and nobody liked, and every joke hit, everyone's laughing at everything. It was incredibly rewarding.
It bombed at the time? Well, my little brother,
it made enough money, but not as much as it was supposed to. Certainly not as much as Gremlins did.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's true. I guess Gremlins was kind of more of a phenomenon.
That was a huge hit.
That makes sense. By the way, you guys recently did, I guess I should ask you, because we talk about movies a lot. What are you watching these days during coronavirus? Because I'm actually kind of like regressing. I've been watching, I don't know what's happened. My brain has popped, and I've now decided that the Star Wars prequels are genius. And I've been watching all those fucking Star Wars cartoons, which I'm also convinced now are genius, the Dave Filoni stuff. So are you having a similar weird regression?
I mean, we did watch the entire Star Wars prequels for the show. We
I heard
recorded
about this.
audio commentaries for
I
them
didn't want to
all.
listen to it because I was worried I'd get mad because now I'm a hardcore Star
Yeah,
Wars
we mostly
prequel
make fun
apologist.
of them. I mean, I think I can appreciate them now for what they are, which is Lucas learning the wrong lessons from Star Wars, basically. Like the two sequels, the two trilogies that come after the first one, Star Wars, the prequels, and then the Disney ones. They both learn the exact opposite wrong lessons from Star Wars. George Lucas took from Star Wars, thanks to his own insufficiencies as a man, and also the influence of everyone.
I don't agree with that.
Who processed but everyone who like told him he was a genius, he processed that to mean, oh, everything in Star Wars that's good was me. I created Star Wars. I am going to now make pure Star Wars now that I can. Now, if you know anything about the formation of the actual filming of the original Star Wars, George Lucas had the original idea and was one of the people involved, but it took a village to make that a watchable film. And it took a village to make the sequels good. He didn't even direct the second and third ones. He had a genius contribution to those movies, but those movies were not his singular genius.
Can I say?
Hold on a minute. Just
all right.
And he took the lesson that it was, and he tried to apply that. And even though there is genius in them, because he does have that ability, because it's not filled in with the genius of others, it's much less. It's not as good. Now, what did Disney learn? They learned, oh, actually, like the question, like Lucas said, this was one person in the form of him who made Star Wars. Disney said, oh, no, they took the lesson. No, this was a collaborative effort, but instead of at the level of artists, like his wife, the editor, and Alec Guinness, and whoever like gave him ideas about, hey, don't make Han Solo a lizard or whatever. Because they are a capitalist entity and they have the eye of Sauron, they see to the level of the corporation, the legal entity that owned it. And so they made the mistake. I could buy this and now it's mine and I can do it. But if you have to use people who aren't endowed with the spark of genius and creative kismet that went into making the originals, that are just guns for hire, who are doing fully alienated labor on someone else's behalf for someone else's spreadsheet, it will also fail. There'll be a little bit of genius, like all the stuff that gets the fans crazy. And all that is channeling visually and orally with music and sounds and stuff, the experience of those originals. But it's just his counterfeit. And Lucas is also counterfeit. It's an anti-dialect. The market intervened in Star Wars at a certain point, broke it up into its subsidiary pieces, and made worse versions of it over time. A reverse dialectic. That's what Adorno says culture is. It is a reverse dialectic.
I only agree with you when it comes to Rise of Skywalker. Last Jedi, I will die for, and I will not hear anything about it. Okay, so we have some questions now. All the questions have been coming in have been, I don't even understand what they're saying. So let me ask one. Matt, explain grill pill. I don't know what the fuck that means.
Well, grill pill was my way of describing what your attitude should be towards the presidential election. The attitude of the guy from the meme who's the fat white guy with the grill, and he's got a grill, and it says, everyone's talking politics, Islam, terror. God's sakes, I just want a grill. And of course, that's an ironic. It's used ironically online because everyone is pissed. No one wants to grill. If they wanted to grill, they'd be grilling. They're actually screaming on the internet because they actually only care about that, but they have to pretend that they have ironic detachment in order for things not to hurt as much. But they still do. They still fucking hurt.
They hurt.
You just have to put that hurt off onto somebody else. They hate more.
We're all red, nude, and mad online.
But anyway, so I'm taking that meme and I'm trying to say, no, seriously, just grill. When you hear some talking about Biden versus Trump, when you hear some liberal yakking in your ear about how it's your moral duty to, don't talk about the Supreme Court. Like, it's a waste of your mental energy, because you don't need to solidify your belief at that level. You don't need to reify your belief at the level of don't vote for Biden. You are on solid ground. Move on. Just flip the burgers and think of another problem.
Okay, so let me ask the next question. Let's do two what ifs. What happens if Joe Biden wins the election? Where are we? What happens?
All right. So I'm taking as an assumption, this might not happen. I'm taking as an assumption that we're going to be looking at a Great Depression-sized economic crisis. if you accept that as the necessary material conditions to play around in, we can continue. Do you agree?
I agree. I agree.
Right. So I've been thinking about this in relationship to current political alignment and the question of realignment. And I've been reading in preparation for an inebriated past I'm going to do maybe later tonight about the 1934 Upton Sinclair run for governor. That one of the main, if we want to ask why the parties are the way they are, why are the Democrats the party of rainbow, everything from like New Deal, like the Democratic Party right now is everything from left-wing entryists to like actual like New Dealers to Keynesians to cynical ID Paul, whatever's, to a mass of people who are genuinely trying to like break free of 500 years of systematized oppression, and using the Democratic Party as their vehicle for doing that. The Republican Party is what it is. One of the big reasons, there's a bunch of reasons, obviously, that all interlock, but one of the big ones, one of the things that caused a real rupture and set us off on a different trajectory was the mere coincidence that the Republican Party was in power when the Great Depression started.
Right. Yeah.
Because they were the party of power, therefore the party of capital, and so they were the closest to capital's demands. Their demands allied with capital's at the closest level, and that interest was always austerity. Squeeze the lemons, squeeze the peasants, get me profit. That's the only thing that matters. It won't be compromised with. And they are closer to that. So they might give you something, but they can't give you much because they're right at the root of power. The party out of power happened to be the Democrats. Could have been another way around. And now they are at cross purposes to a degree with capital. They're at cross purposes with capital to the degree that it can set them apart from the ruling class and gain power. At which point they get into a closer relationship with capital, but from a different perspective. And they're able to, and they negotiate differently on different premises. That's how you get the New Deal, because now you're in power at a different anchor point than the Republicans had been. And it's just merely because the Republicans were in power, because there were progressives and leftists in both parties.
Right. There were at that time
in almost equal number and measure.
Yeah.
Depending on the region.
The
magnet that pulled them was the fact that one party had to react to the New Deal with more economic justice, with more populism, and it became the Democrats. And so that's where that impulse went. And as conditions were improved for some, that made them more community-minded. It made them more invested in the country. It made them more invested in their neighbor. It made them less scared. It made them, at the very bottom rung, less racist. And it made them now want to be in a political party that expressed all their beliefs. And so when the next crisis comes, the political crisis, this time, of the civil rights movement, it drives the Democrats further in that direction of justice, in social justice. But then the fatal crisis of the 70s happened, broke the belt connecting the pursuit of economic justice and the Democratic Party, and it became solely a vessel for social justice, untethered completely from economics. Meanwhile, the Republican Party didn't have a similar thing. It stayed welded. And so that is why Trump is so absolutely without option here. Why these idiot governors are telling people, go back out to work. We're going to force you to go back out to work, but we're only going to let businesses have 50% capacity, even though they don't have 50% overhead. And even though we have no way to make people want to go out and risk their life because we don't have contact tracing. So you're literally it's a cargo cult. You're just sacrificing people to a fucking stone owl, basically, is how much you understand the principles going on here. That is how bereft Republicans are, because they've had their gears stripped by just having frictionless control for so long. They've never had to gain them. And if they persist in power, they won't. But if Biden becomes president and presides as he will, because this is the Democratic Party that just defeated completely a leftist challenge, which means if it gets in power, the left will have no influence whatsoever. And that means that they won't govern to the right of the Republicans. They will govern to the left of where the Republicans were, but they're not going to govern left enough to prevent the Republicans from anchoring back around them on an economic axis. But they're not going to lose their social reactionaryism. And so that everyone's so tired of the fash taking over, that actually comes into view as a possibility if the Democratic Party has to become the only party associated with defending the status quo in an economic collapse. Because then because what happened with the Republicans is that the social values associated with conservatism no longer held sway. Because those social values are what led you to think people should live in the street if they lose their job after the Great Depression. And eventually you move to the point of those social values also say Black people should only live in one neighborhood. Well, because the social values of the Democratic Party gave you the New Deal and then the Great Society, there's a huge built-in wellspring of, their social values are good too, because they give you good results. If there's just the social values and mere defense of the most naked predatory mechanisms of finance capital, then those values will be associated with that. And social liberalism will be destroyed completely. Because guess what? It's not like just whites are going to get more racist. Right. Everyone is going to get more racist against outer groups and more hostile to outer groups. Because there will be no buy-in to social justice, because it is totally unrelated to the concrete material misery that people are going to experience more and more and to greater and greater degrees of intensity under democratic rule. And so the Herrenvolk democracy of some quasi-fascist Republican Party could be developed out of those material circumstances.
If you're just tuning in, you're watching Jacobin YouTube. Our guest is Matt Christman from Chapo Trap House. Please click like, subscribe to Jacobin YouTube. We're going to have lots of great stuff for you this summer. And also right now, this weekend, we're having a sale, a May Day sale, $10 subscription to Jacobin. That's for a year. You get the print issue. The next one is on coronavirus, and it is beautiful. $10 for that subscription, $1 for digital subscription. So please, it's the best way to support Jacobin and what we do. So now we're going to go to a next question. By the way, one counterfactual: if the Republican Party had not been in power, I think if the Republican Party had governed as the New Deal Party, I think we would have intervened to save the Republic in Spain, because the Republicans at that time were the party of the Protestants. The Democrats were the Catholics.
You got to remember at a fundamental level, like if something that big changes, then you are not on terra firma anymore with projecting what would happen after that. So yeah, you can go hog nuts with counterfactuals. With something that big changing, and what's crazy about that is you look at that and it's like, well, that was fully determined by the literal history of all presidential elections. If you want to look at causality, there's no more clear one, but it was totally contingent.
Someone has a really good question on this, which is saying, but fascism developed in reaction to a credible threat from the left, at least in Europe. What happens right now when there's no threat from the left? And it's kind of hard right now to tell. Does Bernieism show that there is a left threat or not really?
I think it's not. See, I think you need to, if you think of, it depends on how you think of, like, yes, it was a credible threat from the left, but what that really means is it was mass politics. Like I was saying, there was mass participation, like there was in the 1850s. People, there was not enough technological need fulfilling. There was not enough technological need fulfilling that could be associated with the state to make enough legitimacy to a government, because you're still shitting in an outhouse. You still have a crappy radio. You don't have that many baubles. You don't have that much of an intense surrounding to really lose yourself in. So you need to have an emotional, moral connection to your government in order to want to see it perpetuated. And that is like our collective biopower invested in politics. Now we have lost, like I was saying, from the 1850s, we have also from the 20s and 30s lost also, and in terms of like exponentially, more significant amount of social investment in the legitimacy of government than technological. It's almost entirely technological. Like I said, it's all about the slitches going on. Our government legitimacy is almost entirely about amusing convenience through technology. There's very little weight to anybody's political beliefs, which means that no one is going to go out in the streets, Nazis or Red Front fighters, as long as technology is where we offload our, because not only, crucially, there's a double-edged sword to all of this, not only do we offload our amusements to technology, which makes us really only relate to our government to the degree that it makes us feel pleasure, mere pleasure, not ecstatic feelings of like communion with a nation, like through patriotic acts or something.
We're a world of OnlyFans.
Exactly.
Yeah, I just found out what that is.
The U.S. We're like we just click on the thing. We're even, most of us even just steal the content from Pornhub. We're not even paying. We're not even paying for it. Shit. No.
What you're saying is Lash was right, and we need to accept.
No. Well, I wanted to finish that thought.
Sorry. Go ahead.
What was I saying?
You were saying that I don't know. I guess I've had too much whiskey. Sorry. Someone did actually ask, what are your top 3 favorite whiskeys? Let's answer that one. What are your top 3 favorite
I haven't
whiskeys?
had enough to have 3 favorites.
Really?
No.
I guess I'm kind of the same way. I like Maker's Mark. That's basically it. And we actually, let's see, we have another question here.
Oh, the double-edged sword of having technology amuse us and that give us privacy. The flip side of that, the flip side of the pleasure is fear in the form of, we have such a huge technological asymmetry in military technology between drones and surveillance.
Right.
That is like, we're both too fat and sassy to want to participate or need to participate in politics, but we're also too scared. And the guns that those guys take to protest are pacifiers. They are aware deeply of how unfree they are, and they have the gun to ward off that feeling. So between those two things, between our fear and our amusement, both of which are allowed by this high degree of technology, we are not going to the streets for fascism or socialism. Those conditions change when the material conditions change, when we stop getting the lights to turn on, when we stop getting our fucking meal replacement boxes, and we stop, and the cable goes off, and the internet goes off, and the hot water goes off. Those things, then you can start talking about biopower being a factor in politics. But until that point, it's all going to be offloaded onto technology, one way or the other.
Next question: what is the future of Dudes Rock for 2020? Because first of all, we should explain. It's not just me. I had to ask Matt at a bar what Dudes Rock was. So first, let's explain what Dudes Rock is, and then let's explain what the future of it holds.
Dudes Rock is merely an application of the dialectic gender relations. If you're a man who meets certain categories, you're a man who is probably white, but not necessarily, probably between the ages of like 25 and 40, probably online a lot, and aware of these milieus, basically. It is a way to signal, although a lot of people are already misusing it, which is inevitable. That's what happened to Christianity. It's what happens to all systems. They get degraded as they lose clarity over transmission through time and space. It's fine. But the kernel of Dudes Rock is a dialectical, non-toxic masculinity. It is essentially a way of laundering the toxins out of masculinity. Like the way that Kevin Costner filters his piss to drink in Waterworld. So basically, the idea is that toxic masculinity, like as it is described in discourse online and is always people phobically afraid of condemning everywhere, is basically an abundance of negative emotions around the reality of being a man. And those negative emotions are around our sense of insecurity around other men in carrying out manly things and filling the role of men. Are we manly enough for men? Are we manly enough to make men think we're men? Are we manly enough to make women think we're men? And also at the same time now, because we're in an era of dialogue and we're in an era of always intersecting identities and experiences, now you have this feminism coming along and making you examine your already fraught attempt to perform manlyhood. And now you're doubly damned, and that is why you are That's why you act out through toxic behavior, because you're trying to reassert that you're a man in the face of your own nagging doubt in the face of other men, and also to punish the mouthy women whose presence remind you of your manness, remind you that they're the reason. Women are the reason you have to perform this arduous performance, because you are not them. Dudes rock is, yes, because of my position in space-time, because of my status as a white male in my generation, I have been crass. I have been overly aggressive in asserting my masculinity. I was wrong to do so. But I don't do that anymore. And so your categories of men and kill all men, they pass through me. Like I literally, like not all men, it doesn't mean anything to me, because I don't hold anything to those terms. I am just a dude who rocks.
Beautiful. I always pictured like a kind of like innocuous 1983 David Lee Roth jumping up on stage in his spandex, and just the feeling of extreme positivity, nothing but that.
Well, right. But the thing is that would have to be dialectically resolved to a finer point, or else people from now would find it toxic. It's like the principle is there, but it would still have to be refined through time and space, or else it would not be dudes rock. Because if he did that exact thing now, it wouldn't be dudes rock. It would be try hard and kind of sad.
By the way,
if 75-year-old David Lee Roth tried to do that, that would be sad and not dudes rock.
It would be.
Well, but there is a version of that exists now. It's our duty to find it or create it.
I agree. Dudes rock 2020. So before we end, I want to give you the chance to explain what this holiday is celebrating, because I forgot to do that at the beginning. So what is May Day? Why are we here? Why is this a socialist holiday? Can you please explain?
Well, May Day began as a medieval European mostly, but really everywhere, marking of spring, marking of the beginning of the agricultural cycle, the beginning of the labor, basically, beginning of labor. Like that's where labor starts, is with the sowing in the spring, and so you commemorate it, and so you might remind yourself why it's important, and so that day became associated with labor as it became more alienated over time. And it became, instead of a celebration of labor, it became a protest against how labor has been deformed by capitalism. And the specific date of May 1st was fixed thanks to the events of the Haymarket bombing in 1886, when a bomb went off during an anarchist rally outside regarding the McCormick Reaper Works strike in Chicago, Illinois, killing a number of police officers and striking workers and bystanders. I believe eight, I might be wrong, anarchists were arrested, tried, found guilty with very little evidence that they were there. It led to a huge Red Scare in the US and Chicago specifically, a proto-Red Scare kind of. And 7 of the leaders were executed. Most of them were German immigrants. One of them was a Native American and ex-Confederate soldier who was a publisher, Albert Parsons. And one man, Louis Ling, a German bomb maker who was smuggled a blasting cap in his cell, and instead of allowing himself to be hanged, he bit the cap, blowing his face off, and then, with the blood coming out of his gaping face hole, he wrote in German, "Hooray for anarchy," on the floor of his cell.
Damn. Oh, that was a beautiful story. All right. Well, I think we should go ahead and wrap it up now. But before we go, I just want to remind one more time that tomorrow on Jacobin YouTube, we have Anna Kasparian and Michael Brooks' show at 1 p.m. Tune in for that. It'll be great. And please, before you go, click like, click subscribe. And don't forget that we have our May Day sale going on right now. All weekend, that's $10 for a print subscription, $1 for a digital subscription. It is a fantastic way to help Jacobin. It is what keeps us, being able to keep the lights on and get new issues to you. So I think that is pretty much everything. So do you have any final words for what's going forward in 2020 in a depression, possibly, and a possible reelection of Trump, or the possible election of the poltergeist villain from Poltergeist 2 that I was putting up. Can't even remember that guy's name. Kane. That's what Biden looks like to me.
I would say tune in, turn on, log off.
Beautiful. All right. Well, everyone, Matt Christman, thank you so much for joining us. And I hope to get back to New York soon so we can go get it.
Yeah, we're waiting for you.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Good night.